Talking with famous people.
In terms of direct versus informative, I think it was pretty confident that I was informative. I think there was like 3, 4 people that suggested I could have been direct. Initiating versus movement, I just don't like when things are disorderly. And in terms of responding versus initiating, usually when I was in those chats, usually I either didn't say anything or I would just start talking about something that I was interested in, and I'm kind of like I kind of talk to myself a lot. When I was younger, I would say it was some more of an accident, but
Yeah.
within the chat, what people would do is they would just latch on to what it is that I was saying, and then that's how we would start having a conversation. But I only talked if I wanted to talk about myself or my interest, or I would just like laugh because something I thought was funny.
Do you consider yourself socially graceful?
I think it's something that I've gotten a lot better at. Yeah.
How important is it to you?
How important? Well, I would say it's as important as it is in relation to whatever it is that I'm trying to do, in terms of like if I need to convey like my idea or something like that, in order for me to get a certain insight or have something done, then I'll do that. Like in terms of like projects, usually I'm pretty. Oh, this is how I put it. I'm good at talking at people, but I'm not good at talking with people.
Somebody comes up to you. Are you more likely to reference past equivalencies, or are you more likely to determine truths about the person that are derived from universals? Like, for example, I know this guy is up to no good because I got hustled by somebody before who was acting like this. Or I know this guy's up to no good because he's got these telltale signs of a con man. Like, those are the two options.
The movements and what it is that they're doing, I would probably start saying off like what could that mean, like what would be making them doing like those certain movements, etc., etc.
What do you think is a more reliable indicator of how things are going to go down? Your personal experience or your understanding of the world?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Probably my personal experience if it heavily connects to that specific situation. But if it's a situation that I've never been in, then I would definitely say my understanding of how I think the world works.
How are you feeling physically right now? How's your posture? Are you comfortable? What?
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I'm just sitting on a chair, essentially.
Are you sitting up straight?
Yeah, pretty much.
Are you aware much about how you're sitting when you're sitting there?
No, I wasn't until you brought up the question.
How attentive are you to things like how hungry and thirsty you are?
I mean, I do forget to drink water a lot. In terms of food, I would reflect at the end of the day, like, man, like I've eaten all this food, but I'm still not full, or like I haven't eaten any food and I'm not even hungry, or something like that.
What did you like studying in school? Or if you're still in school, what do you study in school?
Physics.
Physics?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm pretty... My strong inclination here is that you're an INTJ.
I constantly kept getting ESFP.
From whom?
The CS Joseph chat.
Okay, but the thing is, they're not actually looking at anything that matters. They're not looking at cognitive.
Yeah, I was trying to look at how are they coming to the conclusion that I'm an ESFP, and a lot of the responses were, well, you just sound like one. You know, that's kind of what I'm basing it off of.
One person committed a crime. It's either Mary or Bob.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And one person knows who committed the crime because they know that person. David knows Mary, and John knows neither of the people. What can we conclude?
David knows who committed the crime. We can conclude that the other person who claimed doesn't know, and maybe is, because since that he has no affiliation towards them and is just, I don't know, just thinking that he does based off of maybe evidence that he may have seen or something.
Other person here, do you have an answer to that question?
Well, I have to admit I'm a little confused too.
Alright, listen, Mary or Bob committed a crime. One of the two did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And David or John knows who committed the crime. And the reason they know who committed the crime is because they know that person. What can we conclude given that David knows Mary and John knows neither?
I still don't think that would mean that David necessarily knows, because his reasoning for knowing is just because he knows that person.
I don't tell you the reasoning for his knowing. I tell you that he does know who committed the crime, and that the reason he knows is because he knows that person. Now, look, what I'm saying is, from there we can conclude perhaps that that person told him that he or she committed the crime. We can conclude whatever. But the things I'm telling you, you should take as fact. One person did commit the crime, and no other person. One person does know who committed the crime, and no other person knows who committed the crime except for the person who committed it. And the reason the person knows who committed the crime is because he knows that person. Only one of the two people who might potentially know, knows either of the people. David knows Mary, and John knows neither. So, what can we conclude given all those facts?
That David knows that Mary killed or committed the murder, I think.
Yeah, Mary committed the crime. Okay, well, West, here's the thing. You and 30th Century Man and Mondegreens, I don't know if Mondegreens would answer the question the same way or not, but 30th Century Man, you guys are both addressing the question like people with polar TI potentially. It'd have to be more TI testing, but that would actually be consistent with the SST.
Yeah.
Like, the answer to that question is that what you can conclude is that Mary committed the crime. It's a puzzle question, and that's the answer to the puzzle. But because people with polar TI don't approach puzzles via a consistency elimination approach, they tend to evaluate those things as much more complicated than they are. Concerned with whether the people are telling the truth, the narrator is reliable, basically. INTJs don't value that kind of logic, particularly. In fact, they kind of countervalue it. But that first answer is not determinate at all.
Like, what do you really mean when you say I love something? And it's like, I like it, but then it's like, why don't you just say I like it? Why are you saying I love this? And then they're like, because I really like it. And then I started trying to just understand, what love in and of itself was and how it applies. And then I guess I sort of came to the conclusion that love is 100% subjective. Love can be recognized, but love isn't an actual thing. Like, it's not an embodiment. It can be recognized. So I can recognize love as a mother, breastfeeding her child, while you can recognize love as
that same mother breastfeeding me.
Our
language, the system of symbols that we use to represent objects of analysis in the world. So it might represent a physical object, like a lamp, or it might represent an object of analysis, like a nation state, or it might represent it might function more like a variable, like something you define for the purposes of a given conversation. The other thing, though, is it might represent something that is not fundamentally designed to be represented by language, and that is to say, emotions. The reason why there's a lot of conflict between TI and FI users, if you have, say, an ENFP and an ENTP, they'll come into conflict at some point. It's because the ENTP will say, you're not being fair, you're refusing to define your terms, you don't mean anything when you say things, because
True.
You won't be pinned down on what you mean, so that I can parse away the wrongness from it. And so that's going to cause a lot of conflict between TI and FI users, because TI users want to talk about things that do represent well by a language, and FI users want to talk about things that don't represent well by a language. FI users, or even FE users, you will often hear them say, I may have said that, but I didn't mean that. And I used to be baffled by this. What does that even mean? How can you mean something other than the meaning of your words? But of course, what they're saying is, I'm trying to express things that don't convert well into symbolic representations, and that have fuzziness about them. Like if I say I love you, then that's fuzzy because I'm talking about an emotion. We can't concretize emotions in ways that pin down at all. You can't say, well, how many units of love do you have for me? Do you have 8 units of love? And or do you have only 7 units of love? You know, we can try to parse it out a bit and say, well, there's platonic love, romantic love, fraternal love, sororal love, paternal love, you know, different kinds of love like that. But even that is really saying it's defining the kind of love by the type of relationship, but not telling you anything more detailed about the individual's experience of the feeling of love. Because individual experiences are, in fact, subjective. The whole physical plane of existence is subjective. That is to say, physical action, physical judgment, that is a feeling, physical problem solving, that is, look at the thing and adjust and check, see what's changed and do shit, and physical knowing, which is your own personal experience. All that stuff is subjective. It links back to the particular. But what you did in this one instance was specific to this instance, and it doesn't generalize well.
Or I usually say, I love the way that you're doing this particular thing, or I love how you're able to, like, it's always in relation to something else, so you know exactly what I love about you or the thing that you do, or etc.
Like that has both expressive, like personal expression purposes, and social management purposes. So if I tell you I love this pizza and you made it, it has a much different purpose and meaning and impact than if I say I love this pizza and we're sitting at a pizzeria, you know? A lot of people most people in fact probably run mostly on instinct in regards to most things, and so they just kind of roll with their habits, their attentional habits, and if their attentional habits include FE, then they're probably on an ongoing pattern of like buttering people up, making them feel good about themselves. It seems manipulative, but it's just one aspect of human nature.
So, do you want to ask me any more questions?
You like to get drunk all the time?
I'm 16.
Oh.
But I have thought about the idea of alcohol and drugs in general. How I really think about those is, one of the things that I used to tell people is that I smoke reality. And what I mean is like, I really don't need drugs to really, I guess, get that sort of effect. Like, I don't need to be all, drugged out and drink all this alcohol to be in my own mind, I guess, because I figured that's the purpose as to why people use these drugs anyway.
Everybody's got their own reason for doing drugs. If you don't have any reasons to do drugs, don't do drugs.
Yep.
There's nothing about you so far that I've encountered that reminds me of ESFP. You remind me of INTJ. I toyed with the idea of ISTJ until you demonstrated that you're clearly NI, not SI. If you want to know how to type people quick, we can go tell C.S. Joseph the secret. Shh. First figure out if the person's SI or NI, then figure out if they're TI or FI, then figure out if they're FE or TE, and then figure out if they're SE or NE. about that? And then figure out in which order. Then produce results like Quest tiers and ESFP, which is so obviously wrong, I don't know what to do with myself hardly. People would rather have something wrong served to them in the right way. And I don't know. This is the clusterfuck of wrongness it creates. See this, Joseph? You are as, from the very bottom of your feet to the very top of your head, you and all the things you say about typology are completely full of shit. Talking with famous people.
I just wanted to say that I've never watched one of his videos because just looking at his face, he looks like he's full of shit.
Yeah.